When Madeline Rivers discovered her own parents were suing her for $3.4 million after abandoning her as a baby, she didn't cry. She smiled. Because they had no idea what was coming. The story begins on a cold Vermont morning. 4-month-old Madeline, wrapped in a faded blue blanket, was left on her grandparents' doorstep with just a note. "Please take care of her. We can't." Robert and Elaine Rivers weren't shocked when they found their granddaughter abandoned outside their countryside home. Their son Jonathan and his wife Camille had been drowning in debt, failed business ventures, and substance abuse for years. "She's ours now. We won't let her go," Elaine whispered through tears as she cradled the infant. And they kept that promise. For 6 years, Madeline believed Robert and Elaine were her parents. Her world shattered during a routine school visit when a social worker accidentally revealed the truth. Even at that young age, Madeline understood her grandparents had lied out of love, but the betrayal cut deep. That moment changed everything. It made her question every relationship, every promise. It made her fiercely independent, always waiting for the next person to walk away. "Why didn't they want me?" she asked Elaine one night, her small voice breaking the silence. Elaine pulled her close. "Some people aren't ready to be parents, sweetheart. It doesn't mean you weren't worthy of love. But children don't understand nuance. In Madeline's mind, she simply wasn't enough." What her biological parents didn't realize was that their abandonment was creating something powerful inside their daughter. A determination to never need anyone who didn't choose to stay. Little did they know that 20 years later, this same determination would become their worst nightmare in a courtroom battle that would shock an entire community. Have you ever been abandoned by someone who was supposed to love you unconditionally? Comment below with your story. If you want to see how Madeline gets the ultimate revenge against the parents who threw her away, subscribe now. The justice in this story will make your day. Madeline's childhood was marked by absences. Empty chairs at school plays, missing faces in birthday photos, no mother to help with her first period, no father to intimidate her prom date. Robert became her rock, her protector, her model of what a father should be. He taught her to fish in the creek behind their house, helped with math homework at the kitchen table, and checked under her bed for monsters. "Stand tall," he'd tell her whenever kids at school asked about her parents. "Your worth isn't determined by who left. It's built by how you respond." And respond she did. Madeline threw herself into everything. Straight-A student, debate team captain, community volunteer. If she couldn't be loved for simply existing, she'd make herself impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, Jonathan and Camille lived just 2 hours away. They never visited, never called on holidays, never sent a single birthday card. The only contact came when they needed money. The calls always followed the same pattern. The phone would ring late at night. Robert would answer, his face hardening as he recognized his son's voice. "Dad, we're in trouble. Just a small loan to get back on our feet," Jonathan would plead, words slurring. "You've had 20 chances," Robert would reply, voice heavy with disappointment. "You left your own daughter. Don't ask me to forget that." Each time, Madeline would sit on the stairs, listening, hoping this call might be different. Maybe this time they'd ask about her. They never did. By 16, Madeline stopped hoping. By 18, she'd stopped caring, or so she told herself. By 21, she'd graduated college with honors and entered law school, determined to build a system of justice in a world that had shown her little. What she didn't know was that her legal training would soon become her greatest weapon in a battle she never asked for, against the very people who had thrown her away like yesterday's trash. The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Madeline knew before answering that something was terribly wrong. No one calls at that hour with good news. "Maddie, it's Grandma. You need to come home now." Elaine's voice cracked. "It's Grandpa. He's gone." Robert Rivers, the man who taught Madeline to ride a bike, who sat through every school play, who showed up when no one else would, had died in his sleep. Heart attack. Quick and unexpected at 73. Madeline drove through the night, tears blurring the highway lights. She kept thinking about their last conversation 3 days earlier. He'd called to tell her how proud he was of her making junior prosecutor. "You're fighting for people who can't fight for themselves," he'd said. "That's what matters in this world." The funeral was held in the small white church where Robert had taken Madeline every Sunday. The same church where he'd taught her that family wasn't about blood. It was about who showed up. The pews filled with people whose lives Robert had touched. Neighbors he'd helped during harsh winters, students he'd mentored as a high school principal, friends who'd known him for decades. Madeline stood at the podium, hands trembling as she delivered the eulogy. "My grandfather taught me that love isn't an obligation. It's a choice you make every day, and he chose me when others wouldn't." That's when she saw them. Standing at the back of the church, sunglasses on despite being indoors, Jonathan and Camille Rivers, the biological parents who hadn't bothered to call or visit in 26 years. They didn't approach the casket, didn't offer condolences, didn't speak to Madeline or Elaine. They simply watched from a distance, whispering to each other. When the service ended, they slipped out before anyone could speak to them. "Why were they here?" Madeline asked Elaine as they drove home. Elaine's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "I don't know, sweetheart. But knowing your father and Camille, it wasn't to pay respects." Madeline had no idea how right her grandmother was, or how quickly her grief would be interrupted by something far worse than unexpected funeral guests. 2 weeks after burying her grandfather, Madeline sat in Harold Denning's office. The family lawyer had known Robert for 40 years, had drafted every legal document for the Rivers family since before Madeline was born. The office smelled of old books and coffee. Harold's hands shook slightly as he adjusted his reading glasses and opened a thick folder. "Before we begin," he said, "your grandfather wanted me to give you this." He handed Madeline an envelope. Inside was a photo of her at age 5, sitting on Robert's shoulders at the county fair. On the back, in her grandfather's neat handwriting, "The day you won that stuffed bear at the ring toss, you were so determined. That's when I knew you'd be okay no matter what life threw at you." Madeline wiped her eyes as Harold cleared his throat. Now, to the formal reading of the will, he adjusted his glasses. "To my beloved granddaughter, Madeline Grace Rivers, I leave the entirety of my estate, valued at approximately $3.4 million. The room went silent. Madeline froze. "$3.4 million?" she whispered. Harold nodded. "Your grandfather was an excellent investor. The family farm property alone is worth nearly $2 million now. Then there's his retirement accounts, stock portfolio, and savings." Elaine squeezed Madeline's hand. "He wanted you to be secure, honey, to never worry about money the way he and I did when we were young." Madeline couldn't process it. She'd known her grandparents were comfortable, but this was life-changing money. "There's something else," Harold said, his expression darkening. "Your grandfather anticipated complications." He left this letter explaining his decision. The letter was sealed in a separate envelope marked "In case of contest." Before Madeline could ask what that meant, Harold's assistant knocked and entered, her face pale. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but this just arrived by courier. It's marked urgent." She handed Harold a thick envelope. He opened it, scanned the contents, and his face fell. "What is it?" Madeline asked. "A legal notice," Harold said quietly. "Jonathan and Camille Rivers are contesting the will. They're suing you for inheritance fraud." Madeline felt the room tilt. "They're claiming Robert was mentally incapable when he wrote his will," Harold continued. "They want the entire estate transferred to them as his rightful heirs." Elaine gasped. "After all these years? After abandoning their own child?" Madeline stared at the legal papers, a cold clarity washing over her. Now she understood why they'd shown up at the funeral. They hadn't come to mourn. They'd come to scout their payday. Abandoned daughter versus estranged parents. $3.4 million inheritance Battle Rock's small town. The headlines splashed across the local newspaper the morning the case went public. By noon, 3 TV stations had parked their vans outside Madeline's apartment. No comment, she repeated, pushing through reporters as she headed to work. Inside the courthouse, where she normally prosecuted cases, colleagues whispered as she passed. Being on this side of a lawsuit felt wrong, like wearing someone else's skin. "You should hire Jacobson," her boss suggested, "best defense attorney in the state." Madeline shook her head. "I'm representing myself." "That's a terrible idea," he warned. "You're too emotionally involved." "Exactly," she replied. "No one will fight harder for this." The first hearing arrived faster than expected. Madeline wore her grandfather's watch for strength as she entered the courtroom. On the opposite side sat Jonathan and Camille, dressed expensively but looking uncomfortable. Their attorney, Maxwell Reed, was known for taking high-profile cases with big payouts. His $800 suits and shark-like reputation made him the go-to lawyer for wealthy clients wanting to bend the law. "Your Honor," Reed began, "this is a simple case of an elderly man being manipulated in his final days. Robert Rivers was not of sound mind when he cut out his only son from his will." Madeline's blood boiled at the lie. Robert had been sharp until his final day, doing crosswords, discussing politics, planning his garden for spring. When her turn came, Madeline approached the bench calmly. "Your Honor, my grandfather was not only mentally sound, but his decision to leave me his estate was made years ago, not in his final days. And it was made for one simple reason." She paused, looking directly at Jonathan and Camille. "He chose to leave his legacy to the person who stayed, not the people who walked away." Jonathan shifted uncomfortably. Camille stared straight ahead, face blank. The judge set a trial date for 6 weeks later. As everyone rose, Reed approached Madeline. "This doesn't have to get ugly," he said quietly. "My clients are willing to discuss a settlement." Madeline smiled coldly. "Tell your clients I learned something important from being abandoned. I learned how to stand my ground." The discovery phase of the lawsuit revealed secrets Madeline never expected. While preparing her defense, she requested access to her grandfather's banking records from the months before his death. What she found made her stomach turn. 3 separate attempts to access Robert's accounts online from an unknown device. Password reset requests sent to an email address that wasn't his. A forged document attempting to add Jonathan as a co-owner on Robert's largest investment account. The IP address matched Jonathan's home internet provider. "He tried to steal from Grandpa before he even died," Madeline told Elaine, hands shaking with rage as she spread the evidence across the kitchen table. Elaine looked heartbroken but not surprised. "Your father always took the easy path, even as a boy." Madeline hired a digital forensics expert who confirmed everything. The expert agreed to testify that someone had attempted to gain fraudulent access to Robert's finances multiple times in the months before his death. When Madeline's legal team presented this evidence during depositions, the reaction was immediate. Jonathan's face drained of color. Reed called for a break, and most telling, Camille turned to her husband with a look of genuine shock. "You did what?" she hissed, not realizing her microphone was still on. "I can explain," Jonathan whispered back urgently. "You told me we were doing this because your father was unfair," Camille said, voice rising. "You never mentioned trying to hack his accounts." The court reporter continued typing every word. Reed quickly separated them, but the damage was done. Their united front had cracked wide open. That evening, Madeline received an unexpected call from Reed. "My clients would like to discuss settlement options," he said, his confident tone now replaced with something closer to desperation. "I'm listening," Madeline replied. 50-50 split. You and Jonathan each get half the estate." Madeline laughed. "After what we discovered today, no chance." "Be reasonable," Reed pressed. "This could drag on for years." "Tell your clients I'll see them in court," Madeline said before hanging up. "Have you ever caught someone in a lie so big it changed everything? Comment below with your story. And if you're enjoying this journey of justice, hit subscribe now, because what happens next in the courtroom will make your jaw drop. The evidence Madeline is about to present will change this case forever. 3 days before the trial began, Harold Denning called Madeline with news that would change everything. "I found something while organizing your grandfather's home office," he said, voice urgent. "A sealed letter dated 2 months before his death. It was hidden in his safe behind his military medals." Madeline met Harold at his office within the hour. He handed her a cream-colored envelope with, "To be opened only if my will is contested," written across the front in Robert's handwriting. With trembling fingers, Madeline broke the seal and unfolded the letter. "If anyone questions my decision to leave everything to Madeline, let it be known that I do this not out of pity, but out of pride. She has been the only one to stand by me when others ran. She earned this not by blood, but by love. Jonathan abandoned his child and only contacted me when he needed money. He has never once asked about Madeline's well-being. He has never sent a birthday card or Christmas gift. He has never shown any interest in being a father. I am of sound mind and body as I write this. My decision is made with full awareness and careful consideration. Madeline is my heir because she is the only one who acted like family. Family isn't about DNA. It's about who stays." The letter was notarized and dated, with signatures from 2 witnesses, Robert's doctor and his banker. "This is exactly what we needed," Harold said, eyes bright. "This directly addresses their claim that he wasn't mentally competent." Madeline filed an emergency motion to enter the letter as evidence. The judge allowed it despite Reed's fierce objections. When the letter was read aloud in court the next day, the room fell completely silent. Jonathan stared at his shoes, but it was Camille's reaction that caught everyone's attention. She rolled her eyes dramatically, a gesture of such dismissive contempt that several jurors visibly recoiled. The court reporter captured it in the official transcript. "Defendant Camille Rivers displays visible contempt, eye roll, during reading of deceased's letter." That single reaction did more damage to their case than any evidence Madeline could have presented. In that moment, Camille revealed exactly who she was. Someone who couldn't even fake respect for the man whose money she was trying to take. The courtroom fell silent as Madeline took the stand. After swearing to tell the truth, she sat straight-backed in the witness chair, facing the people who had thrown her away like yesterday's trash. "Ms. Rivers," her attorney began, "can you describe your relationship with your grandfather?" Madeline's voice remained steady. "Robert Rivers was the only father I ever knew. He taught me to ride a bike, helped with my homework, and sat through every school play. When I had nightmares, it was his shoulder I cried on. When I graduated college, it was his face I searched for in the crowd. And your relationship with the plaintiffs, Jonathan and Camille Rivers?" "There wasn't one," Madeline said simply. "They left me when I was 4 months old and never came back. No birthday calls, no Christmas visits, nothing." Reed approached for cross-examination, his expensive suit and confident stride designed to intimidate. "Ms. Rivers, isn't it possible your grandfather kept your parents away? Perhaps he prevented them from contacting you?" Madeline didn't flinch. They lived 2 hours away. They had cars, phones, and the post office. Nothing prevented them from being parents except their own choices. "But you can't know their intentions. I know they called my grandfather whenever they needed money," Madeline interrupted. Somehow they remembered his phone number then. Reed changed tactics. Your grandfather was elderly. Isn't it possible his memory was failing? That he forgot to include my clients in his will? He completed the New York Times crossword puzzle every morning until the day he died, Madeline replied. He could recite poetry from memory and kept track of his investments without help. His mind was sharper than most people half his age. When it was Jonathan and Camille's turn to testify, the contrast couldn't have been more stark. We were young, Jonathan stammered. We didn't have the means. We thought she'd have a better life, Camille interrupted sharply. We didn't abandon her. We made the best choice for her future. If that were true, Madeline's attorney asked, why didn't you ever check on that better life? Not once in 26 years? Camille's answer sent murmurs through the courtroom. We trusted Robert to handle it. Besides, children are resilient. They adapt. The judge's expression hardened visibly. Even Reed looked uncomfortable. As they stepped down, Madeline caught Jonathan's eye for the first time. What she saw wasn't remorse or shame, just calculation, as if he was still trying to figure out how to win this game. But this wasn't a game. This was her life, and she was done being a pawn in theirs. The defense calls Martha Wilkins to the stand. A hush fell over the courtroom as an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes made her way to the witness stand. Madeline hadn't told anyone about this witness, not even Elaine. Martha Wilkins had been the Rivers' next-door neighbor for 40 years. She'd watched Madeline grow up, had brought casseroles when Robert was sick, had been part of their extended family in all but name. After being sworn in, Martha adjusted her glasses and looked directly at Jonathan and Camille. Mrs. Wilkins, how long have you known the Rivers family? Madeline asked. Since 1980. Robert and Elaine moved in next door when they were newlyweds. I watched Jonathan grow up. I was there the morning they found Madeline on their doorstep. And during the 26 years that followed, how often did you see Jonathan and Camille visit their daughter? Martha's answer was devastating in its simplicity. Never, not once in 26 years. She then produced a small blue notebook. I keep a daily journal, have since 1975. I recorded the day they left Madeline, April 17th. I also recorded every Christmas, every Easter, every birthday, the days when little Madeline would sit by the window waiting for parents who never came. Reed objected, calling the testimony emotional manipulation, but the judge overruled him. Martha continued, her voice growing stronger. What people might not understand is that Jonathan and Camille lived just 2 towns over. I saw them at the grocery store sometimes. Once, I asked Jonathan if he ever thought about his daughter. Know what he said? What daughter? Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Jonathan's face flushed red. That's a lie, Camille shouted, standing up. The judge banged his gavel. Mrs. Rivers, control yourself, or I'll hold you in contempt. Martha remained unshaken. I have no reason to lie. I'm 82 years old. I've known Robert and Elaine my whole adult life. I watched them raise that child with more love than many biological parents give their kids. And I watched them cry when she'd ask why her real mommy and daddy didn't want her. By the time Martha stepped down, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom, except for Camille's. She sat stone-faced, examining her manicure as if bored by the whole proceeding. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when Madeline emerged after Martha's testimony. Camera flashes blinded her as microphones thrust toward her face. No comment, she repeated, pushing through the crowd. She had just reached her car when Reed approached, alone. Ms. Rivers, a moment? Madeline paused, keys in hand. What is it? My clients would like to make another offer. Reed's usual confidence had vanished. He looked tired, defeated. 50-50 split. Plus, they'll cover all legal fees to date. Madeline almost laughed. After today's testimony, no chance. Be reasonable, Reed pressed. This case could drag on for months. Appeals could take years. Nobody wins in prolonged litigation. Except the lawyers, Madeline replied. Reed sighed. Look, I know my clients aren't winning any popularity contests, but they're still your parents. Blood matters. Blood matters? Madeline repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. Where was that blood when I had chickenpox at 7? Where was that blood when I graduated high school? Where was that blood when Grandpa was dying? Reed had no answer. That evening, Madeline sat with Elaine at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd done homework while Robert helped, where they'd eaten Sunday dinners, where they'd built a family without blood ties. They offered a 50-50 split, Madeline said, stirring her tea. Elaine's hands trembled slightly. What are you thinking? Part of me wants to take it, Madeline admitted. End this circus. Move on with my life. And the other part? Wants to fight. Not for the money. For Grandpa. For what's right. Elaine reached across the table, her weathered hand covering Madeline's. Some battles aren't about money, dear. They're about principle. Madeline nodded slowly. I know. What would Robert do? Elaine asked softly. The answer came immediately, clear as day. Robert Rivers never backed down from bullies, never compromised his values, never chose the easy path over the right one. Madeline picked up her phone and called her attorney. Tell Reed the answer is no. We're seeing this through to the end. The final day of the trial arrived with standing room only in the courtroom. Word had spread through the small Vermont community, and people packed the gallery to witness the conclusion of a case that had divided opinions and sparked heated debates. As closing arguments concluded, Judge Harrison asked if anyone wished to make a final statement. Madeline stood slowly. Your Honor, I request permission to address the court directly. Reed objected immediately. This is highly irregular. I'll allow it, Judge Harrison said, his tone suggesting he was curious to hear what she had to say. Madeline walked to the center of the courtroom, her voice steady, but filled with emotion that had been building for 26 years. I spent my entire childhood wondering what was wrong with me. Why wasn't I enough for them to stay? Why wasn't I worth a phone call on my birthday? Why wasn't I worth knowing? The courtroom was dead silent. Even the court reporter paused her typing. I used to make up stories about them. Maybe they were secret agents who had to disappear to keep me safe. Maybe they were trapped somewhere and couldn't come back. Maybe they thought about me every day and missed me terribly. Jonathan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Camille stared straight ahead. But the truth is simpler and more painful. They didn't stay because they didn't want to. They didn't call because they didn't care. They didn't think about me because I didn't matter to them. Madeline's voice grew stronger. And now they want to claim what my grandfather left me, the man who did stay, who did care, who did think about me every single day. She turned to face Jonathan and Camille directly for the first time. You want to know the real tragedy? It's not that you abandoned me. Children survive abandonment. The tragedy is that you missed out on knowing an incredible man who would have forgiven you if you'd ever tried to make things right. Jonathan's eyes filled with tears, but Camille remained stone-faced. I spent my life wondering why I wasn't enough for you, but standing here today, I finally understand the truth. Madeline paused, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom. I was always enough. You just never were. The impact was immediate. Several jurors wiped their eyes. The gallery murmured approval. Even Judge Harrison seemed moved. Your Honor, Madeline concluded, this isn't about money. It's about honoring the man who chose love over blood, who chose presence over promises, who chose to stay when others walked away. She returned to her seat as the courtroom buzzed with emotion. Judge Harrison called for a brief recess before delivering his verdict. The tension in the courtroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Madeline sat with Elaine, both women holding hands tightly. When court reconvened, Judge Harrison's expression was stern as he looked out over the packed courtroom. In my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a case that so clearly illustrates the difference between legal rights and moral obligations, he began. Jonathan and Camille sat rigidly, Reed between them looking defeated. The plaintiffs claim that Robert Rivers was not of sound mind when he executed his will. The evidence presented shows the exact opposite. Mr. Rivers was not only mentally competent, but his decision was deliberate, documented, and made with full awareness of the consequences. The judge paused, his gaze settling on Jonathan and Camille. More troubling is the evidence of attempted fraud. Bank records clearly show unauthorized attempts to access Mr. Rivers' accounts before his death. This court finds that Jonathan Rivers attempted to illegally gain access to his father's finances while the man was still alive. Jonathan's face went pale. Camille closed her eyes. Furthermore, the testimony presented paints a clear picture of abandonment, not the kind of difficult decision young parents sometimes face, but complete and total abandonment spanning 26 years. Judge Harrison's voice grew harder. The plaintiffs lived 2 hours away. They had every opportunity to be part of their daughter's life. They chose not to be. They cannot now claim parental rights to an inheritance when they abdicated parental responsibilities decades ago. The courtroom held its collective breath. This court finds that Robert Rivers' will was executed by a man of sound mind who made a deliberate choice to leave his estate to the person who had been his true family. The will is upheld in its entirety. Cheers erupted from the gallery. Madeline felt tears streaming down her face as Elaine hugged her tightly. But Judge Harrison wasn't finished. Furthermore, given the frivolous nature of this lawsuit and the evidence of attempted fraud, this court awards all legal costs and fees to the defendant. The plaintiffs will be responsible for both their own legal expenses and those of Ms. Rivers. Reed's head dropped into his hands. The financial penalty would be devastating. Judge Harrison delivered his final blow with the weight of moral authority. The fact that you brought your own child to court after abandoning her is not just legally questionable, it's morally reprehensible. This isn't just about money, it's about character. And your character has been found wanting. He banged his gavel. Case dismissed, costs awarded to the defendant. As the courtroom erupted in applause, Madeline felt something she hadn't experienced in 26 years. Complete vindication. Not just legal victory, but moral justice. Jonathan and Camille hurried out through a side door, avoiding the cameras and the crowd. They'd come for money and left with nothing but shame and debt. Justice, Madeline realized, sometimes does prevail. 6 months after the trial, Madeline stood in the lobby of a renovated Victorian mansion that now housed the Rivers Foundation for Abandoned Children. The brass plaque by the entrance read, "In memory of Robert Rivers, a man who understood that family is built by love, not blood." The foundation provided scholarships, legal assistance, and counseling for children who'd grown up in situations like hers. It was funded entirely by her grandfather's inheritance, money that Jonathan and Camille had tried so desperately to steal. "Ms. Rivers, your 2 o'clock appointment is here," her assistant announced. Madeline looked up from the grant application she was reviewing to see a teenage girl with familiar eyes. The same guarded look Madeline had worn at that age. The look of someone who'd learned too young that people leave. After the meeting, Madeline returned to her office to find something unexpected on her desk. A handwritten envelope with no return address, postmarked from Burlington. Inside was a single sheet of paper with just a few lines. "We're sorry, we were wrong. We know it doesn't change anything, but we needed you to know. Mom and Dad." Madeline read it twice, then placed it in her desk drawer. Not out of forgiveness. She wasn't there yet. Might never be. But out of closure. Some wounds don't heal because of apologies. They heal because you stop waiting for them. The local newspaper had followed up on the story several times. Jonathan and Camille had quietly left Vermont after the trial, unable to face the community that had witnessed their humiliation. Reed's law practice had taken a significant hit. Few clients wanted to hire the attorney who'd lost such a public case so spectacularly. Meanwhile, Madeline's foundation was thriving. In just 6 months, they'd provided scholarships to 12 students and legal assistance to 8 families, fighting custody battles with absent parents who'd suddenly returned seeking money or control. The irony wasn't lost on her. The money Jonathan and Camille had tried to steal was now helping other abandoned children. Children who, like her, had learned that family isn't about DNA. That evening, Madeline visited Robert's grave with fresh flowers. She knelt beside the headstone and whispered, "You can rest now, Grandpa. I'm using your gift exactly how you'd want me to." A gentle breeze rustled the trees overhead, and for a moment, Madeline could swear she felt his presence. 3 years had passed since the trial when Madeline arrived at her office one Tuesday morning to find someone waiting in the lobby. Her blood froze when she recognized the figure sitting in the corner chair. Jonathan Rivers looked different. Thinner, grayer, wearing clothes that had seen better days. Gone was the expensive suit from the courtroom. This man looked broken. "What are you doing here?" Madeline asked, her voice carefully controlled. "I know I have no right," Jonathan said, standing slowly, "but I needed to see you." Madeline's assistant hovered nearby, ready to call security if needed. "5 minutes," Madeline said. "In my office." They sat across from each other, the same distance they'd maintained in the courtroom, but everything felt different now. "Camille left me," Jonathan said quietly. "Right after the trial, said she couldn't be married to someone who'd sue his own daughter." Madeline said nothing. "I've been sober for 2 years," he continued, "going to meetings, working with a sponsor. Part of the program is making amends to people you've hurt." "Is that what this is?" Madeline asked. "Step 9? Jonathan shook his head. "This is a father trying to understand how he became a monster." The word father hung in the air between them like a foreign concept. "I don't want money," he said quickly. "I don't want anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I think about you every day now, about what I missed, about who you became despite me, not because of me." Madeline studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, for the angle. But all she saw was genuine regret. "I work at a homeless shelter now," Jonathan continued. "Minimum wage, but it's honest work. I see kids there who remind me of, well, of how you must have felt." "Why should I believe you?" Madeline asked. "You shouldn't," Jonathan replied. "I haven't earned that right. But I needed you to know that I finally understand what I threw away, and I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it." For the first time in her life, Madeline saw her biological father as human. 5 years after the trial that changed everything, Madeline stood at the podium of the Grand Ballroom in Burlington, addressing 300 guests at the Rivers Foundation's annual charity gala. The foundation had grown beyond her wildest dreams, helping over 200 abandoned children find their footing in the world. "When I was 4 months old, I was left on a doorstep," she began, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Tonight, I want to talk about what that abandonment taught me." In the audience, she spotted familiar faces. Elaine, now 81, but still sharp as ever, beaming with pride. Harold Denning, who'd become the foundation's legal counsel. Martha Wilkins, the neighbor whose testimony had helped win the case. And in the back corner, almost hidden behind a pillar, sat Jonathan Rivers. He'd been volunteering at the foundation for 6 months now, sorting donations, helping with mailings, never asking for recognition. Madeline had been skeptical at first, waiting for him to ask for something. He never did. "A young reporter asked me recently," Madeline continued, "if I could say one thing to the parents who abandoned me. What would it be?" The room held its breath. I would say thank you. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Because losing them taught me something invaluable. How to stand on my own. How to build family from love instead of obligation. How to choose people who choose me back. She paused, her eyes finding Jonathan's across the room. But I've learned something else over the years. People can change. Not everyone does, but some people genuinely transform themselves. And when they do, when they prove it through actions instead of words, maybe, just maybe, there's room for second chances. After the gala, as guests filtered out, Jonathan approached hesitantly. That was a beautiful speech, he said quietly. Thank you for being here, Madeline replied. For all of it, the volunteering, the consistency, showing up without expecting anything back. It's the least I can do. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Madeline spoke again. Would you like to have coffee sometime? Just coffee. No promises, no expectations. Jonathan's eyes filled with tears. I'd like that very much. As he walked away, Madeline felt something she'd never experienced before. Not forgiveness exactly, but possibility. The possibility that some stories don't end with revenge or justice, but with grace. Her grandfather had been right all along. Family isn't about blood, it's about who stays, and sometimes it's about who comes back and proves they've learned how to stay. If this story of justice and redemption moved you, subscribe now for more incredible revenge stories that will restore your faith in karma. Comment below. Have you ever given someone a second chance after they hurt you? Your story could inspire others going through the same struggle.